I cannot believe it. We're at that time of year where we are on the final days. We close the pre-sale tickets tomorrow at 11:59 p.m. Sorry, I had to just pick Jelly up for my New York City and Paris 3-day immersions for next year. So you get $500 off your New York City ticket if you buy it before November 3rd or 30th. And you get $600 off your Paris ticket if you buy it before tomorrow, November 30th. So I'm really excited to be doing these two events next year. You guys know I live for in person. It's a whole other level. It's a whole other ball game. It's so incredible. And it's just like no one doesn't benefit from coming to these days. But what I will say before we jump into the episode is I really loved receiving emails from you guys following the instructions that I've been giving you in my emails of like, hey, here's the template, break down to me what you are thinking, what you're struggling with, what your questions are about the immersion. And I'm going to give you a really specific answer in return. So if you are seeing this podcast and listening to it in real time, so you're listening to it like on the day it's been released or maybe later that night, I want you to know that you still have time before tomorrow, which is the last day, to send me an email and give me the whole spiel and ask your questions, and I will send you a Loom video back. So I'm basically going to send you like a video of me talking to you about why the immersion would be good or what would actually be better. I'll also give you tips on like what to do to make sure that you get out of the most get the most out of the immersion as well. So for any of you that just need that last little bit of help to really feel safe and excited and expanded about making this incredible investment in yourself, that is what I want you to do. In fact, I would pause this episode before you go any further and actually just quickly send that email to me so I can make sure I get back to you in time. Because if you leave it to the last minute, I'm obviously not going to be able to get back to you before that cutoff date. Okay, so today we are talking about trauma bonds. So if you have not been living under a rock, you would have seen that a few weeks ago, although who knows what's happening at this point, I had a lot of reels go very viral and my following grew like 25,000 in quite literally a week. It was a lot to actually keep up with on the back end. Like, you don't think all my friends are like, oh my God, this is amazing, Monica. I'm like, no, this is so stressful. You don't really, and then when I explain it to them, they're like, okay, I get it. You don't really understand how it actually can be really stressful. But that's just because I'm really focused on like community building and having a relationship with my followers. So obviously when that happens really quickly, it can feel really hard to, make everybody feel connected to me within the space of like a week, and I've got all these new people coming in and I'm trying to foster old follow. Like, it was just a lot. Anyway, the point is that one of the reels that went viral was about trauma bonds. And I did an episode back in 2020. I remember doing the episode. I was living in London. An episode back in 2020 about how Disney has fucked dating. And I talk about trauma bonds in that episode, but I haven't done one since. So I was like, okay, we need an updated, really specific episode with like new technology. Because I was listening to an old episode the other week and I was like, wow, technology has really improved in that now like podcasts just sound clearer for everyone across the board. Anyway, so today's episode is going to be a really specific breakdown about trauma bonds. And I'm actually going to also be making sure to give you guys a few tips on what you can be doing to start to break the trauma bond as well. So let's dive in. So the first thing is, what is a trauma bond? So a trauma bond is basically where I'm going to try and make this really simple for you guys to understand in today's episode. It's basically where you're with someone that is essentially mean to you, but then follows it up with a dopamine hit. So they follow it up with something nice. So, you don't see this as abnormal, and that you need to leave the relationship because your body, mind, and nervous system feels that this is normal to you due to your upbringing, right? So what your upbringing is what your body feels is normal. Things outside of that realm feel abnormal, which is why if you've grown up with really unhealthy relationships, then when you're dating a guy that's like consistent and nice and considerate, you're like, this is fucking weird. He is a psycho. I am bored. I can't, like, ending this right now. People feel like that when to them, nice behavior is abnormal because they've grown up with essentially like pretty toxic behavior. I don't like that word, but just we all know what it means. Essentially pretty toxic behavior, right? So for example, let's say that your parents would shut you out if you upset them and would give you the silent treatment. Now, as an adult, when your partner goes cold and doesn't talk to you for 3 days, you think that you've done something wrong. And then you're begging for them to talk to you like you did as a child, or you just like shut down and got avoidant for self protection. But you're begging for them to talk to you, as an example, because you think that you did something wrong. But when they finally come back around, they kind of blow it all off. Maybe there's some gaslighting or whatever. Essentially, though, that dopamine hit of them coming back around of I love you and like it's okay and oh, I was just busy. Like, look, they're basically telling you what you want to hear. You get this dopamine high and this oxytocin high from them coming back to you. And that is enough for you to not leave and believe that everything is okay. So this will basically keep happening until you get to a point of exhaustion. And then often people will, that's when they'll start doing some self-help work and realize like, oh, I'm in a trauma bond or I was in a trauma bond. But the thing to understand is that these are really hard situations to get out of and leave. And I know this obviously from my own personal experience, but I know this from just understanding like these kinds of behaviors, trauma bond, narcissistic behavior, emotional abuse, etc. They are really, really hard to get out of because not because you necessarily want to stay in it. It's hard to get out of it because you are riding these highs all the time and you believe that they're trying to do better and they're trying to change. So, like I was saying before, often if you find healthy, safe partners and relationships boring, that is a sign that your nervous system is still wired for some kind of trauma. And therefore, you're essentially going to be like hunting out people that activate that feeling of quote unquote familiarity because that's your normal. So you might sit here and I completely get that you want a safe and healthy relationship. But if your body and your nervous system is still wired for unhealthy behavior feeling normal and familiar, it doesn't matter how much cognitive work you do and what you tell yourself, it feels like an uphill fucking battle or like you're banging your head against a brick wall to actually be able to feel essentially safe in a healthy relationship. Because it's like, for some people, what will happen is they start dating somebody healthy that's like consistently texting them, and now they go avoidant because they're like, what the fuck's going on? He's love bombing me. He's like way too nice. This means that something's off, something's a psycho. And I'm like, no, 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 no. What he's doing is actually being a consistent man. It's exactly what you've wanted, but because people's bodies are not wired to feel that as safe, because what you feel is safe is a result of what you were brought up in, because what is familiar is safe. It doesn't matter if you read a book and know, okay, so this is what a safe, healthy relationship is like. That's all well and good for your mind to understand that. But if your body doesn't actually feel like that is familiar and safe, your nervous system will not feel like it can hold it and you will actually repel it because you are going to want to get what actually feels familiar, not what someone's written down in a book for you. Those of you that are interested, Embodiment of Dating is the masterclass that I wish I had when I was going through that hard time of just figuring out dating, right? I wanted to feel good about men. I wanted to feel good and have a strong and confident mindset about the dating world, which I know a lot of us do not have these days. I hear it all the time. Literally, the lady at the nursery was telling me about it the other day. We don't have a good mindset about dating and we need help. I mean, I know I'm in a relationship, but I needed help. And this was the masterclass that I seriously wish that I had. I know it can seem like it's a dry fucking desert out there, but so much of it is in the way that we show up in it. I'm not going to lie, modern dating is hard. Let's not beat around the bush. And the Embodiment of Dating Masterclass is going to help you show up in a way that you are proud of, where you aren't leaking your energy everywhere, and in a way that actually gets you results with good men, not being an anxious or avoidant mess. So for those of you that actually want to have good results with dating and you are dating masculine men that lead you, that chase you, that devour you, that want you, you need to get the Embodiment of Dating Masterclass because I just make it easy for you in how to be feminine in dating, especially a strong feminine woman in dating. You need to do the Embodiment of Dating Masterclass. Additionally, if you are a woman that is dating and you make a lot of money and you probably make either the same amount same amount as him, is if not more, then I would also check out my Feminine Female Breadwinner program, because that would also be really helpful for you. And for those of you in a relationship where you do make a good chunk of money or more, or even just make any money, if you feel like money sometimes becomes a bit of a in the relationship, let's not let it be a in the relationship, because it's fucking money. So also the Feminine Female Breadwinner would be a really great option for you. So I like to say that there is a spectrum for trauma bonds. On one end of the spectrum, there's kind of more of that Stockholm syndrome that I'm gonna get into, which is a form of trauma bonds where you basically become bonded with your abuser because of the roller coaster, and your brain forgets the bad and remembers the good, and you're often in like a fawn response, which I'll go into in a second. So you'll tell yourself what you need to hear to stay alive. On the other side of the spectrum, you have a mild case of trauma bonding, where the average person without horrendous big trauma in their childhood, right? So more of like those micro ones, they will kind of sit in this mild area of a trauma bond. So on the other end of the spectrum. So let's say, for example, that because a parent was emotionally unavailable, they will be with men that are also emotionally unavailable, et cetera, et cetera. Those kind of situations that most of us find ourselves in at least a few times until we learn how to date properly and be in a relationship properly. So I don't love to put the label on those really mild cases as like trauma bonds, just because I'm very cautious of labels these days. And a lot of people will just put labels on things to make them to give themselves an excuse of where they're at, and to then not actually have to like change and improve or accept that you're bloody human. So I don't like to put labels on those really mild cases as trauma bonds, because it makes us think that we need these perfect relationships as human. But the reality is that we're in real relationships, right? It just makes us overanalyze everything. If you haven't listened to my recent episode on about like real relationships, it was like 300 and something. I'll get Olivia to link it below. Oh, somebody else wants to come up. Hi, buddy. All right. You're coming up too. So if you have listened to that episode, then I would make, thank God I have like ginormous podcast chairs for like everyone to fit on. So if you haven't listened to that episode, I definitely would, because there is a difference between a trauma bond and just normal ups and downs and moments in healthy relationships between healthy people. So I will say, like, please don't be on high alert and seeing things that aren't there because you're over concerned and you're like over analyzing the whole trauma bond thing. Then you have like the middle of the road, the middle of the spectrum, right? And the middle of the row is a situation where somebody is staying in unhealthy relationships or being used, even in a friendship, because of the ups and downs, and they're clinging to the highs. So most people aren't at that Stockholm syndrome end of the spectrum, right? Those of you that grew up in really, really bad households, you're likely in the middle. Those of you that grew up in what society would deem as a safe, good household, but you still have plenty of trauma, we all have it, just in different ways. You're probably at the mild end of things, where you're on your journey of learning how to get into a safe, healthy relationship for your nervous system. So I just felt like it was important to kind of break down that just because you're dating a guy that's emotionally unavailable, it doesn't mean that you're in some like fucking horrendous trauma bond. It actually just means that you need to do some work on yourself to not be attracted to and really like engage with emotionally unavailable people. You find them attractive because that is your normal. That is what your body's wired for. But when your body is no longer wired for that, and your body no longer finds that actually attractive and normal, then when you meet someone that's emotionally unavailable, it's like, oh, I'm not really interested. And you're not having to tell yourself you're not really interested. You're physically like, your body is like, no. Okay. So there is no one way that a trauma bond plays out. There can be so many different ways that it plays out. We're all unique individuals, and we need to remember that. This is why like you can't just Google shit, because it's too much of like general answers that can make us feel like something is wrong when frankly something isn't wrong, right? So there can be so many different ways. It could be, from somebody like pulling their attention away or criticizing you, or they're love bombing you. It can start out and then play out in a multitude of different avenues. The important thing to understand is that you become emotionally addicted to the positive reinforcement that occurs after them doing something mean or going MIA or gaslighting you or whatever it is, right? This is why your own self boundaries and regulation and self respect are vital in all relationships. We go into this a lot deeper in Embodiment of Dating #2, which is my program for basically moving through the hard parts of dating and relationships. Be a lover, not a mother, for anyone that's confused by it. So, be a lover, not a mother is for understanding men and learning not to emasculate them. And then EOD2, Embodiment of Dating #2, is for actually just navigating those hard parts and those rocky moments in relationships that we all had. That we all have. It's basically like the unsexy version of be a lover, not a mother, right? But it's the thing that we actually all fucking need. Okay, because now it's like, all right, well, I'm not emasculating my man, but what happens when we're in a fight? How do I like not emasculate him, but also make him like see what I'm trying to get him to see? I'm like embodiment of dating #2. That's why I made it. So if you need more of this and if you need to heal your attachment style, then EOD2 is going to be a really great place for you to start. But of course, like as we'll go into in a little bit, one of the most important things for actually healing a trauma bond is for you healing your trauma. I'm going to go into that in a second. So let me just kind of stick to the one topic so I can stay on track for you guys. God help you sometimes in my tangents. So because you get emotionally addicted to those highs after the lows, as a result of that, you actually start to lose yourself. And as a result, you resign your own needs in the relationship, right? You basically just start to give in to avoid the conflict and possibly, depending how bad it is, in like you avoid to get, sorry, you I don't know where my words just went. You give in to avoid the conflict. And depending how bad the trauma bond was and depending how bad the relationship was, you're possibly giving in to avoid the abuse. Okay. So just to recap, I was mentioning before there is a difference between a trauma bond and Stockholm syndrome. So Stockholm syndrome, to summarize, is basically the idea that if you can't fight them, then be with them, right? It's a safety mechanism in order to stay alive. It's when, people get the extreme example is when people get kidnapped and they end up like falling in love with their kidnapper, or they end up like not going against them in court or defending them in court. That's where it all kind of started. There was a case in like, maybe was it 19 something or other, where there were these captives that were released and they basically would not testify against their abuser, and were like siding with them. So that is Stockholm syndrome, right? Where it becomes like a mental issue and it's a way for you to survive. It's kind of like a form of PTSD basically, right? So that is like the extreme version of a fawn response. So I've done an episode on people pleasing. I can do another one if you guys need, just let me know. But the fawn response is basically like people pleasing. It's I will give up my needs in order to make the other person happy, because if they're happy, then I'm safer. Right. So the everyday example is when you say yes to doing something that you actually don't want to do, but you say yes because you want to avoid the conflict, or you don't want to upset them, or you don't want them to reject you, or that you don't want them to think less of you. So you will go to this fawn response where you're saying yes without even thinking about it, instead of actually saying no, because your body doesn't feel safe to say no, right? So it doesn't matter that you want to say no. If your body doesn't feel safe to say no, that somatic visceral response is what inhibits you from actually being able to say the word no, right? Okay. So that's the difference between a trauma bond and Stockholm syndrome. So remember, there's a spectrum, right? We're not all in these horrendous trauma bonds. You've probably experienced a trauma bond before. Maybe it was a mild case. Maybe it was more of that like middle of the road case, but nonetheless, let's go through some ways that you can actually start to get out of a trauma bond. And actually, really quickly before we go into that, like I was saying for the fawn response, I do want to say that if you are a people pleaser and if you do get really stuck in these fawn responses, the fawn response does make it easier to get sucked into a trauma bond. And the reason is that, people pleasing and that kind of self-blame makes you not see and believe the evidence that is right in front of you. So you keep giving them excuses and staying, right? You keep believing what they're saying. You keep avoiding the conflict. So if you are a people pleaser that finds themselves in a trauma bond all the time, it's like, stop just trying to do the relationship courses, fix the fucking people pleasing, right? Because when you fix the people pleasing, now you're actually making a much more solid foundation for you to relearn how to navigate dating and relationships. Okay. I will also say But I've talked about this before, I've talked about expanders before, right? So when you are around people that feel expansive to you, it expands what your mind and what your body sees and feels as possible. Okay. So if you've never been around somebody with a healthy relationship, it doesn't even feel fucking possible. Like maybe you're dreaming about it, but you're like, how? Like, how does this even work? How does it even feel? I've never seen it before. But when you're actually friends with somebody or, in somebody's energy that does have a healthy relationship, it becomes 10 times more realistic. And as a result of that, because it now feels realistic and because you actually now have a feeling of what it feels like or a look of what it looks like, it becomes so much easier for you to then attract that into your life. And actually, you kind of have like a blueprint of what it looks like. So you essentially have a path of where you're going rather than just like floating around in the dark. So one of the beautiful things that the ladies said about coming to my Melbourne immersion last year, oh, sorry, this year actually, in Australia earlier this year, it was in so many of the testimonials. So for those of you that don't know, what actually happened is we ended up doing a lap dance, me and my fiance. It was not planned. It was requested. It was very nerve wracking for me, but the video is hot as shit. Anyway, so we ended up doing a lap dance, and some of the one of the things that a lot of the girls said this one thing, and it was basically the way that he looked at me was one of the most healing parts for them of the whole 3 days, because it was like a switch flicked in them of that is what I deserve and that is what I want. And when you've never seen that before, it doesn't feel like it clicks. It feels like just this kind of wish, like, oh, maybe I'll get that, but it doesn't feel real. Once something feels real, then it becomes a much bigger possibility and it feels legit. So you actually are like, I am going to get this and I'm capable of getting this because I know that it exists. Once you know it exists, now it becomes easier to get, right? So the lap dance was like really healing for a lot of them amongst everything else. And what was also really healing was the Q&A that he did with me, because to hear a man, it's like some of the questions were about me, some of the questions were about like being in a relationship, or like how did you know Monica was the one, or like blah blah blah. And it was very healing for them to see the way that he spoke about not just me, but how he felt at the beginning of the relationship. It was like light bulb moments. It was relaxing to their nervous system. They were able to feel our energy together. And there's pictures of them, and somebody sent a picture to the group chat and was like, literally the way that they are sitting is pure masculine and feminine. And like the energy difference is just like, you can see it, it's palpable. That is an expander, right? So whether it's seeing us do a lap dance, or whether it's a Q&A of the two of us, or whether it's just being around me, it can feel really expanding. And as a result, it becomes more real and tangible for you. So don't dismiss the very real fact that being around somebody else's energy that you really like or that you want to be like is not only healing, not only going to quantum leap you, it's going to expand your energy field so you can then have a new sense of normal, right? So if your sense of normal has always been unhealthy relationships, being around me, for example, could help you to feel like, oh, this is my new normal. Okay. So expanders are really helpful, and your friends can be expanders if they have healthy relationships as well. Like hanging out with people that are in healthy relationships is really fucking healthy. All right, so on to the last bit of the episode, which is getting out of a trauma bond. So the first thing is, it probably goes without saying, is learning to self-regulate your nervous system. And not just the way of like putting your feet in the grass, humming, listening to binaural beats. All those things are really great, still good things to do. I would do them, especially if your nervous system is like fucking jacked, then I'd be doing those things. The other thing that I actually wrote a post about last night is when I healed my nervous system. So this Instagram post will be out by the time this episode has gone live. So actually we'll link it below. When I healed my nervous system and like really was like, oh, this is what nervous system regulation is, this is what I need to be doing. It was a few years into actually doing this. It was in 2020. So I'd been doing this work for a while. I had my ski accident, as many of you would know. And because of my ski accident, I've spoken about this in the episodes around like energetic weight, is I was holding on to a lot of stress. And as a result, it manifested into like physical weight. and like puffiness. Anyway, long story short, I was meditating. I was going outside. Like I was sitting in the fucking daylight. I was listening to binaural beats. I was going to bed same time every night. I was eating really healthy. I was doing everything that you quote unquote should do if you are wanting to have a relaxed nervous system. But the reason for me why my nervous system was still so jacked up was because it wasn't that I wasn't trying to relax my nervous system. It didn't matter what was happening. My nervous system was constantly in this state of like, I can't hold anymore. It was unconsciously so fucking stressed that it like no amount of feet in the grass was going to regulate my nervous system because I needed to actually like become my own adaptogenic mushroom. And so in becoming my own adaptogenic mushroom, basically I had to train my body to not react to stress the way that it was reacting to it. So even though I wasn't getting like a physical reaction, like you wouldn't have seen it on my face, internally my nervous system was reacting to things and I had no sense of control over it because I didn't even know it was happening. Right. I was my normal. It was my normal in a way, but also it was this feeling. And, it didn't help that I was in lockdown alone and like with no friends and everyone was on the other side of the world. Like all those things didn't help. But what was really important that I didn't fully understand and I then understood it and I made one of my nervous system modalities, which is my nervous system expansion. And like, oh my God, I use it nearly every day. It has been one of the most game-changing things for me in that kind of second part of my healing journey. I do it with you guys. I show it to you at the immersion, and I also show it to you during Queen Alchemy. And obviously one-on-one on all those kinds of things. But nonetheless, for me, what it was about was actually training my body to be able to feel safe in holding more in my life. I didn't know how to hold more. It was like I was at my capacity and I couldn't let anything else go. So I was just in this constant state of stress. When I then expanded my body's ability to actually hold more, that is when I started dropping weight very, very quickly, and actually coming to a place of like, this is my equilibrium in my body. And now my nervous system is hella regulated. And I now have like this incredible self regulation tool. So, anyway, number one is nervous system regulation because that is going to help you to stop going into unhealthy relationships because you'll have that self regulation to be deterred from that, to not keep going into it, and to stay in healthy relationships and not sabotage them because they're quote unquote boring. The next thing is that both parties obviously need to do the work if you are in a trauma bonded relationship and you want to stay. If one of you is strong enough to basically de-arm the other person, that can work, right? So your security and your secure attachment style, if you're in that place, and not tolerating their tactics essentially can help to undo quote unquote their behavior and support them in becoming healthier. Sometimes like my fiance kind of said this to me, but I've really helped my fiance with conflict resolution and not getting super stressed out in like conflicting situations. If he met me fucking 8 years ago, that wouldn't have been the case. But anyway, now I stay so calm in those kind of just stressful moments and in fights and in like those hard conversations and whatnot. And so I've helped disarm his normal mechanisms of like conflict avoidance, essentially. So that he's then becoming more of that secure attachment style as well. So if there's one really strong version of you that can also help to disarm the other person, or if you are with a person that is really secure, they can help to disarm you as well. And very often it's a little bit of both sometimes, right? Even when you get into a healthy relationship, like I was saying, there's always going to be those rooms for this. There's always going to be room for growth. There's always going to be ways in which you are helping the other person to heal in different capacities. So there's going to be times where like you're secure about something and that's going to help disarm the other person, or they're secure about something and that's going to help disarm you. And that's just a beautiful part of healing together in a relationship and just being like, I don't want to use the word conscious. It's because I'm not like, oh, conscious relationships, but it's just that's part of being really self-aware, I would say, and actually just continuously being committed to co-creating your dream relationship. Because once you're in the relationship, it doesn't end. Now you are co-creating your dream relationship. And so disarming the other person is a really healing part of that because you're committed to continuing to grow and evolve the relationship and make it better. Okay. The next thing is instead of hoping that the person will change, you need to accept the present moment. Like, don't future think. Don't think, oh, but like, I can see the true him. Like, I feel the true him. Like, he's going to change. If he's actually going to change, great. You guys can break up. He'll go do the work, he'll change, and then he'll come back to you. If he's not going to change, then guess what? When you break up, that's not going to happen. He's still going to be the same fucking guy. And you've just dodged a massive bullet and haven't gone on for, 3 more years with emotional turmoil, right? So just for now, realize that the likelihood of them actually changing is really slim. The likelihood of them changing for you ain't going to happen when you're in the relationship because they have you. It's more likely for these kinds of people to happen outside of the relationship because something has got to actually happen for them to wake up, right? That's the reality. And so the breakup can be the wake up for them. Ladies, I'm so excited to be announcing that my 2024 immersion is officially open for enrollment. Yay! I'm so excited about this. So, well, I don't know about enrollment, but you can like get your ticket, whatever, do the things. There are 2 locations, New York City or Paris. You can come to both, you can come to one. The events are the same. It's just simply a choose your location kind of situation. So tickets are available right now and you get $500 off if you get it during this current sale period, like open cart period. Then the cart will close and the tickets will go back up to their normal price for any that are left, but we could sell out during this time. So please make sure that you grab this while you can. We also have an extended payment plan option that will not be available closer to the event time. I always have a few of you closer to the event time that ask if you can get a ticket and get an extended payment plan. The answer is always no. I'm sorry, but all payments have to be completed before the event time. So what that means is that if you need a kind of longer payment plan of 6 months, then you need to book your ticket now and not wait, because the closer that we get, the smaller the payments plan, I can't speak, the smaller the payment plans get. If we even have any tickets available. So Paris and New York 2024 immersions, I am so excited for my 3-day ones to be coming to you guys in 2 spots next year. Like, how good is next year going to be? Wedding, immersion, book, God knows what else. I cannot wait. I will see you there. Any questions, you know where to find me. The next thing is that you need to respect and value yourself. Sometimes the nicest thing that you can do for the other person and for yourself is to leave them. I'm going to say it again. Sometimes the nicest thing that you can do for yourself and the other person is to leave them, because it's the only thing that's going to make them wake up, right? So if there's any hope for them, it's not in a relationship with you. They need to actually be made to self-reflect if they're even capable of that. The last one is stop listening to promises of love or change. You need to focus on their actions and not just believe their words, because their words are fucking bullshit. Believe their actions. Value and respect yourself in the relationship. And so the last, I guess like the super last one, I just said the last one, but the super last one is, I'm going to try to explain something that I did a little Instagram story on the other week, because my client, when I went on, clients messaged me and she was like, Monica, is it weird that like now when I'm dating a guy and he can't manage his own stress, I'm like turned off by it? She was like, old me would have, been like, oh, let me help you, or given him excuses, or like really got into that like mother role and whatnot. But now I'm just like, ew, like I'm going to, like, I can handle my stress. I'm going to do me, you do you. She literally said, why can't he just put it like, I can't, no, that's right. She said, I kind of just want to say to him like, all right, well, let's just put a pin in it. And then like, when you're ready to actually date and like, give me time, then we can cross that bridge when we come to it. And I was like screaming on the other end of the phone, because I was like, oh my God, you've gotten it. You've gotten it. Like, because she sent me another message and I was like, no, you have hit the nail on the head. Like, you're now at the place. And it's so hard to explain to you guys. So I'm hoping that you're going to get this with the example. She's now at the place where, because of all of the healing and the reprogramming of her body and her nervous system and her mind, she doesn't need to tell herself it's unattractive. She doesn't need to tell herself it's a red flag. She doesn't need to tell herself that, oh, don't date these kind of guys, don't date these kind of guys, don't date. Like, she's not having to tell herself any of that and kind of fight against willpower. She is now unattracted to it. And let me tell you, the version of her a year ago would not have been like, I'm kind of unattracted by this. Now it is a visceral response. Like, she does not need to think through it. She doesn't have to tell herself anything. There's no willpower involved. It's just the new way that it is. So when I'm telling you guys, like, you're no longer going to be attracted to those kind of guys. You're no longer going to be calling them in. You're not going to be entertaining them. This is what I mean. It's like, you won't be entertaining them. You won't be attracted to them. You won't be calling them in because your energies now don't align anymore. Right. And you are unattracted to behavior that once you would not have batted an eyelid to. That is what happens when you've done somatic healing and then you've done embodiment and integration. That embodiment and integration is so important. She's in the embodiment, right? She's embodying all of the healing that she's been doing with me, right? So it's just like, I hope that explains to you like what I mean by no longer being attracted to those people, because the reality is, friends, is it's not easy. There is a heavy detox period that comes with getting out of a trauma bond, right? You'll want to go back to them. You'll be thinking of only the good times. You'll be having the flashbacks and thinking maybe it wasn't that bad. Like, you'll be thinking those things if you're in a bad trauma bond or if you were in a bad trauma bond. And it becomes so much harder to get out of trauma bonds when you are doing this all cognitively and not somatically, right? Because you are thinking your way out of a trauma bond. You're no longer attracted to that behavior. And I want you to be in the place where you're no longer attracted to that behavior, because then it becomes easy to leave and to not engage with those kinds of relationships anymore. So it wasn't that one-on-one client was in like a trauma bond or anything like that. But for her, what it was about was like, she would just date guys that were not behaving the way that she wanted them to behave. And it's like, and instead of having to do the cognitive work all the time, then she did the somatic work, did the healing. And now she's like, I'm just not attracted to it anymore. And I'm like, yes, bingo. Because as you can probably feel, it's like, wow, that would then become so easy. I wouldn't be beating my head against a brick wall. I wouldn't be in these like anxious fucking spirals anymore, even though I know the guy isn't necessarily healthy. Why am I still attracted to him? Why am I still just like hooked? Why am I looking at my phone every 5 minutes? I'm like, yeah, because you're playing the cognitive game, not the somatic game. And the cognitive game is really important, right? Like, there is a time and a place, of course, for like talk therapy. There is a time and a place for mindset work. Those parts are really important. You know, in my work, sometimes a client just needs a talking session, or she needs to understand something. And then by understanding it, she can then integrate it. So all of those pieces are important. And because 80% of the signals that your brain gets are sent from your body, so it's like body up. 80% is body up. You can then imagine, if you aren't doing any body work, 80% of that healing is body. 80% of those signals going up to your brain are body based. So if you're not doing any body work, it's like, okay, you've healed 20% of the issue. Like, sweet. You still have 80% to go. Does that make sense, everyone? So even if you only did somatic work, it's like, well, you've healed 80% of the issue. So now you only have 20% to go. Like, that seems easier because you've healed 80% of the issue because you've done body-based work, right? You've healed those visceral issues, those somatic responses. Oh my God. Today was so juicy. I hope that you guys love the episode. I know there's lots of new listeners. So if you are a new listener, please make sure that you leave a written review on iTunes for the podcast, and then send us a screenshot to media@monicayateshealth.com. When you send us a screenshot, I've got a really great meditation to send you. You can't buy it anywhere. And trust me, you want it for Christmas time, because it really helps you to stop leaking your energy and to come back to yourself, which also would actually be a good thing for those of you trying to get out of trauma bonded relationships too. So I'm going to leave the episode here. I will love you and leave you guys as usual. I really appreciate it when you like post a screenshot of the episode and whatnot on your Instagram story and tag me. It means the world. Please leave a review. And if you love the episode, share it with a girlfriend to help them out too.